You made yourself smaller, not all at once. It happened slowly, the way light fades at the end of the day. You didn't notice until the room was already dark. You stopped ordering what you actually wanted at dinner. You changed the subject when your opinions were too strong. You laughed at jokes that made you feel small because laughing was easier than the silence that came after disagreement. You learned somehow that the version of you that was easiest to love was the one that took up the least amount of space. And you told yourself this was love, that adjusting yourself to fit someone else's comfort was care, that disappearing slowly was devotion. But somewhere underneath the quiet compliance, something in you knew. This was not connection. This was survival. There is a moment most people who have been through this can recognize. It does not announce itself. It arrives like a small tightening in the chest, a hesitation before you speak, a thought you had halfway through a sentence that you swallowed before it could reach the air. The thought was something true about you, something real. And before it even formed completely, a part of you decided, not here, not with them, not safe. And so you filed it away. You kept it internal. You kept yourself edited, because somewhere along the way, you learned that being too much of yourself came with a cost. What was that cost? The person pulling away, the mood shifting, the silence that arrived like punishment, the subtle sense that your full self was inconvenient, too loud, too emotional, too complicated, too direct, too you. And so you made a quiet trade. You exchanged yourself for proximity. You gave away your edges to keep the peace. But the peace you kept was not your own. This video is not going to tell you that you were weak. It is not going to tell you that you should have known better. What it is going to do is show you exactly what was happening underneath that pattern. Why the body learns to shrink. Why some people find it genuinely difficult to believe that they can be loved as they are, without editing, without softening, without making themselves easier to hold. And by the end, maybe something will become clearer. Not just what you were doing, but why, and what it means to stop. Here is the wound at the center of this. If I am fully myself, I will be abandoned. Not everyone thinks this consciously. In fact, most people who carry this belief would deny it immediately. They would say they are confident. They would say they know who they are, and they do, somewhere. But the body holds a different record. The body remembers every time being fully yourself created distance, every time your emotions were too much, every time your needs were treated as a burden, every time your presence, unfiltered and unedited, made someone uncomfortable. The body keeps a score, and the score it has been keeping says, the full version of you is a risk. So the nervous system does what it always does when it senses a threat. It adapts. It learns the shape of the environment and molds itself accordingly. It quiets the parts of you that have historically caused friction. It softens the volume. It calibrates. It does all of this automatically, without asking your permission, because staying connected has always felt more urgent than staying whole. This is not a personal flaw. This is a deeply human response to a very old kind of fear, the fear of being left. To understand where this pattern begins, we have to go back before the first romantic relationship you ever had. John Bowlby, the British psychologist who spent decades studying how human beings form emotional bonds, proposed something that changed the way we think about love entirely. He argued that attachment is not optional, it is biological. The impulse to form close bonds with other people is wired into the human nervous system, not as a preference, but as a survival mechanism. For most of human history, to be separated from your group, from your caregiver, from the people who held your life together, was not merely lonely, it was dangerous. A small child alone in the world did not have good odds. So the attachment system evolved to make separation feel like an emergency, to make closeness feel like oxygen, to make the loss of a bond register in the nervous system not as disappointment, but as threat. Mary Ainsworth, who built on Bowlby's work through direct observation of children and their caregivers, noticed something quietly devastating. The way a child learns to manage that attachment threat depends almost entirely on what the attachment environment teaches them. When a caregiver is consistently available, warm, responsive, the child learns something essential. I can need things. I can show up fully. My presence is welcome. My distress will be met. But when the environment is inconsistent, when warmth arrives unpredictably, when the caregiver is sometimes attuned and sometimes distant, when emotional needs are sometimes answered and sometimes ignored, the child learns something different. The child learns to watch, to monitor, to perform, to adjust, to present a version of themselves that is more likely to receive what they need. Not too loud, not too much, not too needy, softer, easier, less. This is where many of us first learned that love required editing. Not because anyone said it out loud, but because the body felt it, because the pattern was lived before it was ever understood. And now here we are, in modern relationships, with all the complexity they bring, the dating app conversation that starts warm and goes cold without explanation. The partner who seems drawn to you when you are bright and easy, but pulls back when something real surfaces. The person who tells you they love you and also makes you feel like too much. The relationship where you learn to send the shorter message, to wait before calling, to express less so that they would not feel overwhelmed. The modern version of this looks like strategy, like being thoughtful, like choosing your battles. But for some people, it is something much older than strategy. It is the nervous system replaying its earliest script. Make yourself easier to love, and maybe this time, they will stay. You may have found yourself doing things that, from the outside, look like emotional maturity, not making a big deal of things, not overreacting, letting things go, being easygoing, being adaptable. But on the inside, something else was happening. You were abandoning yourself, quietly, repeatedly, systematically, not because you chose to, but because some part of you genuinely believed that the alternative was being left. And so the two options, as the nervous system understood them, were lose yourself or lose them. Most people, most of the time, choose to lose themselves, because losing yourself feels slow and survivable, but losing them feels like an emergency. What does it cost? It costs you, slowly, your sense of who you are. When you have spent months or years shaping yourself around someone else's comfort, you begin to lose track of the original shape. You forget what you actually think, separate from what they think. You stop knowing what you want from a Saturday, what kind of conversation feeds you, what kind of silence you can rest in. You have been so focused on monitoring their emotional weather that your own internal world has gone quiet from disuse. And then something strange happens. The relationship, even if it continues, stops feeling like connection, because the person they are loving is not entirely you. They are loving the edited version, the adapted version, the version you offered because it felt safer. And some part of you knows this. Some part of you aches with the knowledge that you are not truly seen, because you have never truly shown yourself. This is one of the loneliest feelings a person can experience. To be close to someone and still feel invisible. To be chosen and still feel unknown. There is also the exhaustion. The sustained, relentless exhaustion of performing a curated version of yourself every single day. Of monitoring how much space you are taking. Of holding back the thought, the feeling, the opinion, the need, before it can land somewhere it might cause damage. Of being your own censor, your own editor, your own emotional regulator, not for yourself, but for someone else's comfort. And the terrible irony is that often, this does not even work. You make yourself smaller and they still pull away. You erase your edges and they still seem restless. You give them the easy, unbothered version of yourself, and somehow the connection still feels thin. Because it is thin, you cannot genuinely connect with a performance. Here is what people usually do when they recognize this pattern. They decide to become harder. They decide that they were too soft, too open, too available. They read about strategy. They learned to mirror unavailability. They practice seeming unbothered. They make themselves wait before responding. They hold back affection as a tactic. They build a wall and call it a boundary. This is the wrong direction, not because vulnerability is always safe. It is not always safe. Not because boundaries are wrong. Boundaries are essential, but because what is happening in this approach is still the same underlying move. Hide who you are to control how someone sees you. The strategy version of you is just as edited as the pleasing version of you. You have changed the performance, not the fear. Somara does not believe in becoming cold. Becoming cold means the fear won. It means the nervous system decided that the only way to be safe in relationships is to not fully be in them. To engage from behind glass. To feel a little less, need a little less, risk a little less. And yes, that works, in the way that not eating works, to avoid the risk of indigestion. You are protected. You are also starving. The goal is not to become someone who cannot be reached. The goal is to become someone who is safe to be themselves. What does that actually mean? It means that healing from this pattern is not about changing who you are. It is about learning to trust that who you are is something that can be loved, not despite its fullness, not after being softened, not once it has been made more manageable. As it is, with its opinions and its needs and its intensity and its tenderness and its contradiction and its full, unreduced self. That trust does not arrive overnight. The nervous system does not update its beliefs the way a phone updates its software. It updates slowly, through experience, through relationships that prove the old script wrong, through moments when you show up as yourself and discover that the sky does not fall, that someone can handle your realness, that someone can be glad for it. It also begins with something quieter than a relationship. It begins with noticing the moment of self-erasure before it completes. The sentence you were about to say, the need you were about to express, the boundary you were about to name, and the exact instant when the familiar fear arrives. Too much. Don't. Not here. You do not have to immediately say the thing. But notice the flinch. Notice what the body is doing. Notice the old calculation running. What version of me is acceptable here? And then gently begin to ask a different question. What version of me is true here? Not dramatic truth. Not weaponized authenticity. Not refusing to read a room or overriding other people's genuine needs, but the simple, quiet practice of staying a little closer to yourself than you have been, of letting a little more of the actual you into the space, of trusting incrementally that your presence does not need to be earned through smallness. A healthy relationship, the kind that actually holds, requires two whole people, not one whole person and one edited performance. Not one person who is themselves, and one person who has arranged themselves around the other. Two people who can be genuinely seen, and who find that what they see is something they are genuinely glad to be near. This is the kind of admiration that lasts. Not the admiration you earn by being convenient. Not the warmth you receive when you are careful not to want too much. But the recognition that arrives when someone sees the full shape of you, complicated and real, and chooses to move closer. You cannot find that in a relationship where you have made yourself invisible to maintain the peace. You cannot receive genuine love as a performance. And you cannot know whether someone is capable of loving the real you if you have never let them see the real you. Setting boundaries is not about becoming difficult. It is about becoming legible. When you say what you actually think, when you name what you actually need, when you allow the full texture of who you are to be present in the room, you give the relationship an honest foundation. You give the other person something real to respond to. And you give yourself the only honest answer to the question that has been haunting this pattern from the beginning. Can someone love me as I am? Because here is what years of self-editing never answers. When someone stays, you cannot know if they are staying for you or for the version of you that you made them. And that uncertainty is its own kind of suffering, that hollow wondering. That sense that even in connection, you are somehow alone. The only way to know is to be, to show up with the whole of yourself, in manageable and honest doses, and to watch what happens, not to test people, not to use your realness as a trap, but to allow yourself slowly to be known, and to learn through experience rather than belief that your full self is not the threat the nervous system has been treating it as. You are not too much. This is not a phrase to write on a mirror, though you can. It is something the nervous system has to learn through experience, the way it learned the opposite. Slowly, through moments of being genuinely met, through relationships where you did not have to earn your welcome by being easier than you are, through the quiet discovery that your realness does not drive love away. It is the only thing that can draw it close enough to matter. What was learned can soften. What the body rehearsed in one environment can be revised in another. The nervous system is not fixed. It is responsive. And when it encounters enough evidence that being yourself does not end in abandonment, it begins, tentatively and then more deeply, to relax. That relaxation is not apathy. It is not numbness. It is not the carefully managed distance of someone who decided that needing less was the same as being healed. It is something rarer. It is the feeling of being in a relationship and also being yourself, of loving someone and also staying, of being close without disappearing. That is the kind of love worth looking for, not the love that only arrives when you are quiet enough. Not the warmth that comes when you have made yourself small enough to fit, but love that meets you where you actually are. Love that has room for the whole of you. You are never too much. You are just in the wrong rooms.